Mobile market statistics indicate that Marvel Snap is dying. The team has failed to stop the rapid decline in revenue that began last year. Without exaggeration, 2026 could become a critical period for the game. In this video, you will find an in-depth analysis from experienced Hearthstone players and a fresh outside perspective on Snap's current problems. Why is one of the best card games in history declining so rapidly?
Time to rock and roll!
Hello my friends. My name is Bot Mathematician and this is Holomancer.
Also, Chief Investigative Reporter Dora joined us this evening.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
Let's be honest, we have developed a very complex and ambivalent attitude toward Marvel Snap.
The team behind the origins of Hearthstone, led by one of its founding figures, Ben Brode, created a true gaming masterpiece. From a gameplay perspective, they managed to offer a completely new take on modern card games, specifically designed for mobile platforms.
At the same time, we have always been struck by how easily this team betrayed all the ideals they so carefully embedded into Hearthstone's DNA.
The game's financial success demonstrated that competitive integrity could easily be sacrificed, and that the outdated pay-to-win principle could become relevant once again.
Dear viewers, this video turned out to be extremely difficult for us. We collected data and analyzed impressions, trying to build our own picture without relying on external opinions. Our views evolved significantly over the course of writing this script.
I even had to return to the game for more than 2 weeks in an attempt to gain real hands-on experience. We invested a tremendous amount of effort into this project, and the best reward for us will be your like, your subscription to the channel, and a click on the notification bell. Thank you.
Let's start the discussion with a contrast between the mobile market indicators. But please keep in mind that any figures should be treated as conditional.
In December 2022, just a few months after release, the game generated $14 million in revenue across all mobile platforms. A year later, this figure dropped to around $7 million, which was still an outstanding result. The game continued to hold a leading position in the genre on mobile platforms across most of the world outside of China. By December 2024, estimated revenue declined to a still impressive $5 million. However, this was no longer enough to maintain leadership, which passed to Yu-Gi-Oh! And by December 2025, revenue collapsed to a conditional $1.5 million, pushing the game from a genre leader into the category of mobile outsiders.
The drama of the situation lies in the fact that for most live service card games, the mobile market is not the only source of revenue. They are also successfully monetized on PC. This cannot be said about Snap. According to App Magic, the game's position among the highest-grossing titles in the 11 largest gaming markets in the world on Steam is one of the lowest in the genre. Snap is competing with the casual version of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is genuinely surprising. In the second half of 2025, the game appeared far less frequently in the top 500 highest-grossing titles on the platform. According to SteamDB, the number of active players is significantly lower compared to its main competitors from the mobile market. For example, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel has 10 times more players on Steam, which is a serious reason to pause and reflect. Thus, there is little doubt that the primary source of revenue is the mobile platform, and that is exactly where things have been looking very grim lately. Based on these figures, and if the current trend continues, the game could effectively die by the end of this year. However, we discovered one extremely important hidden factor that could prolong the game's life. Starting in mid-2025, Snap began trying to bypass platform holder commissions. Management actively encourages players to make purchases through its own web store by offering additional valuable bonuses. An entire web points system was introduced. When you purchase any item, you receive a certain number of points that advance you along a special reward track. The game elegantly navigates the legal rules of digital storefronts and carefully promotes bonuses directly through the client. I am confident that a portion of engaged players switched to purchasing through the web store, as the sharp decline in platform revenue coincides with its launch. However, this does not negate the broader trend of declining effectiveness, which had formed well before the introduction of web points.
The main intrigue lies in how much additional money the game generates this way, and how expensive it is to keep Snap running. Using Warcraft Rumble as an example, we can identify certain red lines for mobile projects.
In September 2024, the first wave of layoffs hit the game's team, clearly pointing to optimization efforts and cuts to long-term development plans. At that moment, according to App Magic, The game was still in the top 1,000 highest-grossing mobile applications and was allegedly generating just under $1.5 million in revenue. For Microsoft, this level of income was not sufficient to retain the entire team and continue long-term development. When revenue dropped to around $500,000 per month and the game fell into the top 2,000 highest-grossing apps, it was no longer enough even to support regular content releases.
Hearthstone is a far more resilient game compared to Snap, yet the loss of the Chinese market in 2023 led to almost immediate layoffs and a reduction in gameplay variety. A decline in revenue forces emergency measures, and something similar may very well await Snap in the near future. At this point, Snap is close to dropping out of the top 1,000 highest-grossing mobile applications. The only factors that could significantly extend Marvel Snap's lifespan are the success of the web store, lower labor costs, and the smaller size of the second dinner team compared to Blizzard.
So why did the collapse happen in 2025? In reality, the year turned out to be incredibly difficult for the game.
The split with the original publisher Nuverse and the brief ban on access to the game in the United States due to sanctions against ByteDance dealt a massive blow. Second Dinner reacted quickly and separated themselves from the influence of the Chinese giant, but the damage had already been done. After that, the game became noticeably worse at attracting new players, which is a huge problem for mobile projects.
However, the real breaking point came with the release of the Kid Omega card as part of a special event. To receive even a simple discount on purchasing the new card, players had to grind for an absurd amount of time. This triggered a mass boycott that caused serious damage to the game. The developers made one of the worst decisions possible, but in our view, there were compelling reasons behind it. The game's financial efficiency had been gradually declining, and this process was only accelerating.
Despite the chain of shocks that plagued Snap throughout 2025, we believed there were deeper problems.
After all, the downward revenue trend had formed earlier.
In an attempt to find the roots of the crisis, I had to return to Marvel Snap for the third time and look at the game with fresh eyes. Please keep in mind that my opinion is based on the experience of a returning player, and in many cases it will directly contradict the experience of long-term consistent players. In addition, I will be actively comparing Snap to Hearthstone. This comparison is unavoidable, given that the same team was involved in the creation of both games. The first emotion I experienced upon returning was irritation caused by the overloaded interface design. The game menu is oversaturated with details, countless buttons, multiple currencies and numerous progression systems. It is pure chaos. But what frustrated me the most were the new golden crystals in the collection manager that require manual activation. They unlock separate progression tracks for each card and reward additional card customization tools and visual effects, yet everything available to me at the early stages looked like pure junk. You have to make a ridiculous number of clicks just to make the game leave you alone. Overall, the interface creates the vibe of a cheap mobile game and does not align at all with a unique card game that has already earned a distinct place in the history of the gaming industry. In this regard, Hearthstone's experience seems to have been completely ignored.
And this may be the first reason behind Snap's decline. No, we do not mean the terrible interface itself, but rather the strict focus on the mobile gaming audience.
Marvel Snap does not prioritize delivering a new experience to players who are already deeply invested in card games. Instead, it targets a very broad casual audience that primarily plays on mobile platforms and is accustomed to intrusive grinding, multiple currencies, and constant microtransactions, or simply loves the Marvel universe. At the same time, the game does not try to set trends or change established perceptions of mobile games. It does not follow Hearthstone's path. Instead, it fully adopts the worst mobile design practices. Focusing on a mobile audience is, in theory, a solid business decision that should increase financial efficiency. In practice, however, this approach comes with serious drawbacks. It is widely believed that mobile players are significantly harder to retain even over the first 3 days, let alone for months. As a result, forming a loyal core fanbase from a casual audience is extremely difficult. Mobile players tend to switch games more often. The same applies to fans of popular franchises. There are many Marvel games, and new ones are released regularly. Part of the already captured audience may leave the game after the release of a new project in search of fresh experiences. By the way, Snap has already lost its status as the king of the Marvel universe on mobile platforms.
Starting in 2025, the game attracted on average, around 150,000 new players per month. This is a low number for a game focused exclusively on the mobile market.
Targeting such a broad audience creates one major advantage. Over 3 years of existence, the game has been installed on approximately 30 million mobile devices. Potentially, Part of this audience could be brought back.
Hearthstone regularly brings back players who left the game in the past. The most noticeable spike in interest usually happens after the annual rotation. The experience for new and returning players has changed dramatically over recent years. Its most important component is new pre-built decks that can be used for a week, after which you can keep one of them forever. The game lets you taste new gameplay and decide whether it is worth continuing. In addition, there are catch-up packs that provide significantly greater value for players with small collections. Dora, could you please tell us how things look on Snap's side?
Despite its difficult current situation, Snap shows no real interest in bringing players back. While Hearthstone allows you to receive almost all rewards immediately and feel a fast start right away, Snap's return rewards must be collected over the course of an entire month, requiring daily logins. There are many rewards, but their usefulness is close to zero. The game manipulates players by creating the illusion of progress. To actually move forward, you need to obtain key cards for new playstyles, but the game does everything it can to prevent that from happening. From the very beginning, Snap places an impenetrable wall of missing cards in front of you and gives you no tools to climb it. The game almost feels like a trap designed to catch new players. The situation for beginners is much better. Gradual card collection from Series 1 and 2 provides tangible progression at the start. Players discover basic strategies and experiment with different ways to play. They feel real progress, at least in the early stages. But after this fast start, they end up in the same terrible position, with no way to catch up to long-term players unless they are willing to pay.
Speaking of purchases, monetization remains an extremely important aspect for players engaged in live service collectible card games.
Over its 3 years of existence, Marvel Snap has significantly reworked its core progression system multiple times. This might be the first card game in history to undergo so many global shifts in its in-game economy within such a short period. It feels like the game simply cannot find an optimal formula. Dora, in your opinion, has the current monetization finally become fair?
Guys, it's pointless to talk about fairness in a situation where collecting gameplay critical elements in a competitive game is built around gacha mechanics. Just like before, without purchasing the battle pass, players cannot access certain new cards for an entire month. Now the team is also asking you to pay even more money for additional battle pass advantages, which must be purchased every single month. The main way to acquire cards is a new pack system that allows you to obtain a random missing card from a specific pool. The newest cards are significantly easier to get because they are placed in a special seasonal pack, but their price is noticeably higher. The most expensive packs belong to Series 5, the rarest cards in the game. I was horrified to discover that I am missing 120 cards, and that all my accumulated resources are still not enough to buy even 2 packs. Instead of a full-fledged crafting system, the shop offers 3 cards of different rarities once per day, available for purchase with in-game currency. As a result, if I need a specific Series 5 card, my chance of seeing it is roughly 1 in 120. If cards don't repeat, it could take up to 4 months just to encounter a single card I need. Besides this, to buy I need a currency that accumulates very slowly. If I wanted to buy a single random card with real money, it would cost me roughly $60. I'm not entirely sure I converted the premium currency correctly, because the system looks intentionally confusing. For comparison, in Hearthstone, the same amount of money lets you buy 4 mini-sets containing more than 150 cards. Marvel Snap fans, please tell me in the comments that I made a mistake in these calculations, because this situation looks insane. On top of the massive gap in my Series 5 collection, I also have large holes in Series 4 and Series 3. Acquiring Series 3 cards is the least problematic part for me, as they can be obtained relatively actively, by Snap's standards, through the infinite progression track. Since my return, I've already received 9 cards. Each time, I used the automatic deck building feature based on the newly acquired card, but I couldn't build anything playable. I was completely stuck. At this point, I have 64 Series 3 cards left to collect. If the drop rate doesn't suddenly decrease, which I'm not sure it won't, completing the collection will take me around 4 months, even accounting for newly added cards. All of this creates enormous psychological pressure and frustration. Despite repeated reworks, the situation is getting worse for new and returning players. The team changes approaches and resource balance, but the core issue remains the same: Snap's systems do not work toward player engagement. At the same time, I do acknowledge that the experience of long-term veterans may be fundamentally different from that of catch-up players. If someone played very actively from the very beginning, they may be able to buy the cards they need relatively easily, thanks to already having a large collection. But taking a break from the game can become incredibly expensive, and perhaps this is exactly what still holds the core of the community in place.
The interface, progression system, cost of collecting, and the experience of new and returning players are critically important components of any successful online game services.
But still, the key component of any game is gameplay. An engaging gameplay loop is what keeps us playing and pushes us to accept major compromises. So the real question is the gameplay worth it?
First of all, playing on a smartphone in vertical orientation feels genuinely great. The gameplay itself is at a very high level compared to many other aspects of the game. It's intuitive, clear, fast, engaging, very simple on the surface, yet complex in its nuances. The developers offer a modern take on card games without relying on the genre's traditional canonical elements, and that's genuinely impressive. But there are important caveats. From the moment I first discovered Snap, one of the best free-to-play decks was the on-reveal strategy, essentially an analog of Hearthstone's battlecry mechanic. After my second return to the game, I once again played mostly this deck. And now, to my surprise, I found that it's still relevant. At low ranks, I was sitting at nearly a 100% win rate. On the one hand, I was happy that a deck I played in the past remained viable. For comparison, if you skip 6 months in Hearthstone, you may find that the meta has changed beyond recognition and that almost all of your old decks are no longer playable. But Snap doesn't really encourage you to try something new, and that's exactly what killed my interest. Just when I was about to leave the game again, a small miracle happened. I got lucky and found Deadpool, which finally unlocked a new way to play built around the destroy mechanic. It felt like a true gift of fate. My version of the deck is still missing around 3 or 4 key cards, which has a very noticeable negative impact on my win rate, but at least I was able to experience something new, and that felt great. When my interest faded once again, a second miracle happened. After almost 2 weeks of active play, I finally received a random Series 5 card as a return bonus. Namora has a genuinely interesting effect that opens up a wide creative design space. Looking up meta decks revealed that I couldn't assemble anything truly competitive with her, so I had to build a deck on my own. And honestly, that was a great experience. It even turned out to be fairly effective against players with limited collections, but it almost completely falls apart against opponents with full meta decks. As far as I can tell, new cards rarely introduce fundamentally new ways to play. Most often, they act as slightly better replacements within existing strategies or open branching paths for archetype variations. As a result, core strategies slowly evolve and gain multiple versions. This type of game design leads to many cards becoming interchangeable. In theory, the game should allow players to assemble reasonably functional strategies even without a broad collection of meta-defining cards, and that's a good thing. But in fact, the absence of key cards will noticeably weaken you, and this directly contradicts the stated ideology of the game.
In our view, this is a very unusual approach within the modern industry, and it fits perfectly into the logic of having no crafting system. It is interesting and does have certain advantages.
However, it also comes with plenty of downsides. The philosophy of card interchangeability and slow strategy growth feels organic in games focused on single-player experiences. In competitive games, however, the lack of access to tools that affect win rate is unacceptable, because it directly undermines competitive integrity. On top of that, the slow evolution of strategies in live service games can create a feeling of stagnation. Players face the same strategies for extremely long periods of time, with their impact merely fluctuating based on the meta. This can lead to faster player burnout. Developers, in turn, are forced to constantly release slightly stronger cards without overshooting their power level. Otherwise they risk breaking the meta and killing diversity. While other card games deliver a flood of fresh experiences, Snap offers them drop by drop and changes at a very slow pace. Slow change is not necessarily a flaw, it is a design feature. In my opinion, Snap would work brilliantly as a secondary card game rather than a main one. Its development pace is perfect for a game that players return to from time to time, and this concept would suit it perfectly. The problem is that Snap does not want to be a secondary game. It demands maximum attention.
While I was exploring the game, I often felt that it was forcing me to spend more time than I wanted. It's not about the sheer amount of time spent, but rather the pressure to keep playing even when you no longer feel like it. In this regard, Hearthstone acts far more elegantly. Matches are short and dynamic, but you sometimes need to play a lot of them to complete quests. and the main issue is that they quickly become very repetitive. Decks are small, which is an advantage on one hand, but on the other, it leads to using the same cards in almost the same order over and over again. The most important factor that changes the experience is locations. Sometimes they genuinely disrupt your game plan and make a match more interesting, but unfortunately, this doesn't happen often. I was genuinely excited to take part in the High Voltage Overdrive event. This is a short-term mode where randomness plays a much larger role. The value of this format lies in offering a different gameplay experience, which is extremely important. As you play, you earn currency that can later be exchanged for items in a special shop. But you have to play an enormous amount to buy anything worthwhile, and that is incredibly exhausting.
Overall, pressure and passive coercion have always been defining features of Snap, and this contrasts sharply with Hearthstone, where you only need to play once every 3 days to complete quests.
In Snap, you constantly feel like you might miss something important if you skip even a single day, and that is draining. You are expected to complete quests, participate in events, and hunt for cards in the shop, hoping to find something you need. Add slow progression and lack of access to meta decks on top of that, and you end up with a game that is psychologically exhausting rather than fun.
In conclusion, I once again became convinced that Snap is the inventor of many cool and unique ideas. But all of these advantages are almost completely nullified by the game's mobile ideology. It's like a refined fine dining dish drowned in cheap ketchup and mustard.
The gameplay itself is far too good to be focused primarily on a mobile audience. At the same time, the game's ideology does everything it can to prevent card game enthusiasts from finding any real motivation to commit to it long term.
So what actually caused Marvel Snap's decline? We believe we have found our own answer, and it largely depends on how you choose to view the game. If you look at Snap purely as a mobile project, then it was a bright and commercially very successful game that is now gradually fading away for the same reasons as most mobile titles. Now the game is at a point where, with its mobile audience and insane pricing, it is losing out to most competitors targeting a more niche audience. But overall, it's an impressive business case that very few will be able to replicate.
As deeply invested players, we always viewed the game through the lens of the global collectible card game industry, and that may not be entirely fair. From this perspective, it becomes one of the most tragic stories. A game with colossal potential that failed to conquer the industry due to its bold disregard for modern market principles and conventions. In today's environment, Snap's philosophy is incredibly aggressive and simply cannot compete with the major players on the market.
But in reality, our desire to see Marvel Snap among the major players in the card game market is largely our own cognitive bias.
Over 3.5 years, the game has taken no real steps toward competing on the broader market, and that clearly indicates it doesn't need or want to. Snap has no ambition to push the industry forward or to share a new kind of experience with longtime fans of the genre. The game wants to remain a mobile game, primarily for a mobile audience, as long as this is possible. From this perspective, reducing all of the game's issues to simple developer greed is a major misconception. Even if the price of a random card pack were reduced 100-fold, from $60 to 60 cents, it would change very little as long as the underlying philosophy of the game remains the same and the metagame continues to evolve at such a slow pace.
Creating games as a service is like solving a complex equation. It's a fragile balance of elements that must work in synergy, and achieving that balance is extremely difficult. The variables for success in the mobile market are one thing, while success in the global card game industry requires a completely different set of variables. The Snap formula turned out to be very successful, but, predictably, not particularly long-lasting. And I believe the leadership understood this perfectly well from the very beginning.
We genuinely regret that the game is slowly declining.
We no longer see any realistic way to reverse the current trend. Most likely, the game will continue to gradually lose its engaged player base, and it will become increasingly difficult to replace them with new players.
At the same time, Marvel Snap arguably has one of the highest potentials for a reboot. Even a basic rejection of mobile ideology could turn everything upside down and reignite interest among fans of collectible card games. Because of that, a future release of Marvel Snap the 2nd of May very well be a realistic scenario.
Dear viewers, to wrap things up, we'd really like to hear your opinion.
What was your experience with Snap? How do you feel about the current progression system based on packs? Do you believe the leadership can handle the crisis and prevent the game from dying?
Let us know your thoughts below and join the polls in your community tab. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to support our content and stay updated.
Traditionally, we want to express our boundless gratitude to our sponsors.
Dear friends, your help is invaluable. We will be grateful for any support.
Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for spending this time with us. We really hope that we will have the opportunity to get in touch in the next video.
Take care of yourself.
And never give up.
Job's done.